You're on mute.
Look at that. So we started and I'm on mute. That must be because there's two of me on the screen today for some reason. I have a twin. So welcome, members of AAPPR. I am so delighted to be here today. My name is Mariela Alvarez Sosa, and you usually have Liz moderating these webinars for you, but today you have me in Liz's absence. She'll be back in a few weeks. I am collaborating with AAPPR, and I'm very, very honored to welcome this amazing team to chat with us a little bit today about physician recruiter burnout, which I think all of us can probably relate more than we would like to admit to. So, without much ado, I would like to first start off by introducing Jeff. And Jeff, you'll do me the honors of introducing Sandro and Nadra. So let me start off by sharing a little bit about Jeff. Jeff Niles is the Chief Revenue Officer at HWL. So he joined the company in 2018 and currently serves as the Chief Revenue Officer with more than 20 years of experience in healthcare contingent workforce management. He has led sales, implementation, and client services for some of the largest and most influential healthcare organizations in the nation, installing technology solutions in over 3,000 hospitals across 50 states in the UK. Prior to joining HWL, he was VP of Sales and Marketing for ShiftWise, one of the first and largest VMS platforms in the healthcare industry. He has led sales and marketing for over 10 years at ShiftWise, growing the business to over $1 billion in spend managed. He stayed on after the acquisition of ShiftWise by M&N, leading the sales effort and resulting in the highest annual revenue on record upon his departure. Wow. He lives in Tampa with his wife and two children and is an active member in the community. He has a BA from Miami University and an MA from the University of Cincinnati. Welcome, Jeff. I will turn it over to you and I will go on mute. Just as a reminder, for those of you who are joining us for the first time, we don't see you, we don't hear you, but we read you. So I see your notes and your questions on the chat. So please ask questions along the way, and the team would like to be able to answer those questions. So if you have questions, I'll be monitoring those. Feel free to ask those questions, and I'll raise my hand on your behalf, and I'll be your voice. All right, so Jeff?
Thank you, Mariella. And yes, please ask questions along the way. We want to make this as interactive as possible. And today we're really going to treat this almost like a panel discussion you might see at a trade show or something like that. So very much encouraging you to participate, those in the audience. Yes, today we're going to be discussing physician recruiter burnout. It's an issue that's becoming increasingly visible across the healthcare industry. I think everyone would recognize that. Physician recruitment has never been more complex. The competition for talent is intense. Workloads are rising, and the stakes are incredibly high for health systems trying to maintain access to care. Recent workforce data shows that nearly half of US physicians are experiencing burnout, and that stress and workforce shortages are affecting the entire ecosystem around them, including the teams responsible for recruiting and retaining physicians. Um, Interestingly, research within the physician recruitment industry itself shows that more than 50% of physician recruitment professionals report burnout as well, driven by high search volumes, administrative workload, and increasing competition for talent. So today we're going to be talking about what burnout looks like for physician recruiters, why workloads have intensified, what health systems and leaders are doing to support recruitment teams, and how operational models, including support for locum staffing, can help recruiters focus on their primary mission, which is, of course, recruiting great permanent physicians. So I'd like to introduce our two guests and allow them to introduce themselves. So I'll start with Nadra. Welcome. Thank you for joining us today, and I'll let you talk a little bit about your role and what you do at UMass Memorial.
Great. Thanks so much for having me. So I am the Vice President of Human Resources for Organization and People Development at UMass Memorial Medical Group. I also have responsibility for provider recruitment, and I've been with the organization since 2023. I have roughly 2 decades of experience in healthcare. I appreciate both the human resources and the operational perspective in how we support our management teams. In my current role, I have two incredible teams of professionals, and they serve as strategic partners for the leadership of over 3,000 caregivers within UMass Memorial Medical Group. Before joining UMass, I held a position of director and senior human resources business partner for Bay State Health, which is a little bit west of UMass Memorial. And we are located in central Massachusetts, and we're the largest health system west of Boston. I'm a proud graduate of the University of Rhode Island, and I currently reside in Portsmouth, Rhode Island on Aquidneck Island.
Thank you, Nadra. Appreciate your time today. Sandro, welcome. Thank you as well for joining us today. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Thanks, Jeff. So my name is Sandro Altair. I'm the Vice President of Provider Recruitment for RWJ Health. We're the largest health system in New Jersey, and we're also the state's largest private employer. So we have just a touch over 45,000 employees, and that continues to grow. My responsibility is I oversee the provider recruitment function across the enterprise. So essentially, we have an academic partnership with Rutgers Health on the academic side. Then we have several acute care hospitals and joint ventures on the health system side, and my team does the recruiting for all those entities. I've been with the organization for about 3.5 years. I've done a lot of, I actually have a business development and physician relations background. I did medical sales for several years, and then worked at a few big health systems within the New York City area. Did some operations with surgery centers and the ASC world for a few years. So I like to think that some of the things that I do on the day to day, the experience that I've had in all these different roles in the past kind of help me with the function I have today. I'm looking forward to the discussion here. I'm also a local in New Jersey, so hopefully we have some other folks around the area.
Yes, I think we do. And thank you. And thank you for joining. So let's frame this discussion before we get into the Q&A part. As you can see in this statistics from Health Resources and Service Administration, which is the federal government, if you look into the future, even as far out as 2038, interesting to note that while supply will increase fairly significantly in raw numbers, as it relates to demand, however, it's fairly flat in the shortage of physicians. So all the grounds that are being made as far as educating new doctors and bringing more physicians into this country and going to work, it's not going to be able to keep up with the demand. And that's just the reality I think we all have come to accept. And so therefore that places a lot of pressure on the recruitment function within large health systems and actually health systems of all sizes. And when you look deeper into the numbers, you can see some of these are pretty daunting. What stands out to me here is family medicine and hospital medicine, where you're below 80% ability to meet adequacy by 2038. So that means that there's going to be some changes in care delivery. I think that's a topic for another day. But these numbers certainly are lay out the challenge ahead for the physician recruitment industry. On top of the looming shortage, we have the real issue which we're discussing here today, which is the burnout factor of the physician recruiters themselves. And you can see here that almost 50% of all physician recruiters are experiencing burnout or reporting a burnout. That's to me, 1 in 2, that's high. It may be perceived as the norm in our industry. Maybe that's the case. We'll hear from our panel and see what they have to say. But it certainly is something that needs to be addressed, because turnover in the physician recruitment function places an additional burden when those positions turn over or if there are vacancies in those roles. Another interesting fact, and this is a little bit dated, but my guess is this number probably has increased, which is that 55% of recruitment professionals respond to work emails or other work-related messages outside of their normal hours. So part of what I think we've seen in this country is a shift to remote work, but that also has an impact on the work-life balance, and I know that will come up today in our discussion. There's also the issue of locum tenens. So with the shortage of physicians, with the demand where it is, in order to cover that gap, most organizations, 82% in fact, are using locums to help cover that gap. And according to CHG Healthcare, 52,000 physicians work locum tenens every year, and that number will continue to rise. So on top of the burden of filling vacant physician positions, recruitment teams are increasingly burdened with having to manage locum tenens and the staffing vendors that support those efforts, and that can increase the workload and contribute to burnout. So some of the things that we'll talk about today, and we'll transition now into the discussion portion, are how to solve this issue. And I don't think there's any silver bullet or 100% right or wrong. It's really multifaceted. So I'm going to go ahead and turn to our panel and ask Nadra. I'll start with you. From your perspective, what does burnout look like from your seat for physician recruiters today, both in your organization now and in the past?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it shows up in just that constant need to figure out how to spend their day, right? And their day gets longer. I would say remote work interferes with our ability to kind of compartmentalize our home and our work. And so, that constant need to take a look at your phone and see what's come in and really losing sight of those boundaries that existed. And it's not to say that they didn't exist when you went into the office, right? Got a call on the ride home or, needed to follow up on something later in the evening, but it just seems like it's creeped in even more so. And despite all of those extra time and effort, you feel like the recs keep coming and the competition is fiercer, or the department is asking you to do something that takes you away from that, day-to-day work. And so it's constant negotiation on how you're able to spend your day and focusing on the things that are truly important.
Thank you. That makes a lot of sense. So have you introduced any policies or guidelines around communication after hours? I know some organizations have done that where, it's kind of like taboo to after 6 p.m. or something, don't, unless it's an emergency, you shouldn't be reaching out to colleagues about work issues. And I know, of course, that's hard to do in the world of physician recruitment where everything is very fluid and you might be trying to, close an offer and it could be 10 o'clock at night and that's when the provider is ready to talk. So, but I'm just curious if you've thought about that or if that's come up in any discussions.
Yeah, as part of our ongoing engagement conversation, right? Because you can see engagement in individuals kind of diminish over time. So when you ask them, how are you feeling about your work? What's weighing on your mind? Work flexibility is really important. So, we have individuals with young families, and so they appreciate the fact that they could perhaps work a few hours in the morning, have the afternoon to focus on family, and then log back on in the evening, and that fits. The other thing we instituted was I'll call it a buddy system. Each of our recruiters has a partner, and that partner is there when people are out unexpectedly. They stay very informed on what each team member is working on, so that if at a moment's notice they have to follow up on something, and then we use Teams to share tracker information so that anyone at any time can review the status of any candidate wherever they are in the process. Then that seems to have allowed people the ability to truly step away.
That's great. That's an interesting approach, and I think a lot of people on this call may have follow up on that. So again, if you have any questions, please feel free to post those in the chat. Sandra, I'll turn it to you. Same question. What does it look like, burnout? How do you detect when, you might have a recruiter that is, what manifests, what would be a manifestation of burnout in your mind or approaching burnout?
Yeah, I think part of the discussion that or the stats that you shared earlier, I think everyone realizes that there's physician shortages. I think the physician recruitment landscape has evolved over the past several years and will continue to evolve with all the technology we have. I mean, Nadra hit it on the head where, you talk about a field where we're working with individuals that may be in surgery all day. They might be in the operating room. They might see patients, and the only time they could talk is like, "Hey, I can reach out to you at 6, 7 p.m., 10 p.m. at night. Let's get this to the finish line." And it doesn't give people in our industry sometimes the option because we want to close it out. I think there's ways that you can be flexible with the individuals that are the recruiters in this role. So some of the things, I mean, we've done. And another thing to know, which I think is pretty, was fascinating for me. This was actually the newest AAPPR benchmarking report. I think 1 in 4, right around that figure. Physician recruiters, so the individuals that are in our field, there's 1 in 4 turnover. So that means if you have 4 team members in 1 year, one of them statistically is likely to leave. I think that figure or statistic is very high. It should be much, much lower when you look at some of the other industries that we're in as far as turnover numbers, et cetera, et cetera. One thing that we do in our system, and listen, we're fortunate enough where we're bigger in size, so we might be able to maneuver certain things or shift a certain way, but our recruiters are cross-trained across the board when they first start, and they're hired as a physician recruiter. And then when they come into their, when they're done with their orientation and their training, they're specific to a service line. So anesthesia, for example, has their own recruiter. Pediatrics has their own recruiter. Surgery has their own recruiter, et cetera, et cetera. And it enables them to be subject matter experts. And if they're leaving, we have team members that are cross-trained, but they're really just focusing on things that are very specific to their service line, and they become subject matter experts. That helps because if you're a recruiter and you're doing this specialty and you're doing a primary care and then you're doing a complex spine surgeon, they're much, much different on the day-to-day as far as negotiations and how some of those visits go. And it kind of pulls them in all these different directions. So I think, Jeff, to answer kind of your second piece that you asked there, is we try to make them very specific to the service lines they're working with. They work very closely with a lot of those leaders. They're on tap with the C-suite in the hospitals or with the service lines. And we make that very, very apparent up front when they first join. Hey, get in touch with all the key decision makers. You should have great relationships. So there's not a lot of back and forth, and it avoids a lot of messiness that leads to burnout and drives them, everyone crazy day to day. So those are some things that we've done that have been pretty effective, and they're helpful, and setting them up for success in the beginning. I mean, everyone's a recruiter as well. I was talking to one of my CMOs yesterday, and he's just like, recruiter and your recruitment team's, the best of the best. But when that physician comes in and they're coming into the facility, everybody's in recruiting. It's the CEO that meets with them. It's the division chief. It's the other surgeons that they're going to work with. Everyone has to be there collaboratively as a team. And it puts less of a burden on our recruitment team and our recruitment members because everyone's in it together.
That makes sense. The sharing of the workload spreads it out and reduces that pressure in some cases. Another question. So, as you look at the physician recruitment industry, and both of you have been doing this long enough to see changes, in your opinion, and Sandra, I'll come to you first on this. Has the job of physician recruitment changed over the last 5 to 10 years, or is it just getting more intense, or has there been any since you've been in this industry, have you noticed anything that's really changed that contributes to this issue of burnout?
Yes, so I would say a little bit of both. I think it's obviously evolved and changed quite a bit, and it's probably gotten more intense. I think, I mean, let's just go back a couple years. I think it was more transactional, and now I think it's more strategic driven, where the leaders and your hospital executives or your health system executives or hiring managers come to the recruiter as, and I always like to say the subject matter experts, they're coming to us with questions about compensation trends, what the preferences are physicians, what are you hearing out there, what are the competitors doing? And we're really acting, and I always tell my team this, let's act as consultants. We want to be very strategic. Hey, if Dr. Smith, who interviewed at facility A and he was a terrific candidate, but it ended up not working out, he lives too far, or we ended up going with in another direction. Hey, that was a great candidate. Let's put him over to hospital C or D or a different location and be strategic about that so we're not losing the candidate. I think it's changed quite a bit just because we're asked to do a lot more things that are very high level and comprehensive, and we work with several different teams. We're working in line with our attorneys and our in-house counsel, and then we have a physician contracting team and the recruiters, and then between all of that we're working with all our hiring leaders and executives across the board. So I think several years ago, and I'm even thinking just a couple of years ago, it was a little bit more transactional, plug and play, and now it's much more, hey, it's very strategic driven, it's very comprehensive, and the day to day it's very complex.
That's interesting. Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. It sounds like you've built a really good organization there with both structure and philosophy. Nadra, what have you seen that's changed in past 5 to 10 years in physician recruitment in general? It's a new world out there. What do you notice?
Yeah, so when I first arrived at UMass Memorial, it was a post and pray mentality, right? I couldn't agree with what Sandra has said more. We also are aligned with different service lines, and that was a new concept. We had separate recruiters for APPs and physicians, and so the meeting was a cast of thousands versus having one person really truly understand the business. And we've really worked very, very hard to shift that position in those leadership meetings from note taker basically to consultant advising, having the ability to bring data around different specialties, and really wanting to understand which positions are truly most mission critical. It's not just the one that's been open the longest. So it's really diving into being truly a business partner. The other thing that I would say in the last year and a half that's really made things more challenging is the whole immigration landscape. We've been a health system that's been very reliant on that for specific areas, and that's added to the complexity. I would also add the fact that there are more and more highly specialized positions. So you're looking for unicorns sometimes around individuals that have a really, really focused and unique skill set. And that I don't think was the case 5 or 6 years ago. There was more generalist with specialty interests. And now it's a lot of highly specialized individuals no longer interested in doing a lot of generalist work. So all of those things have really, I think, changed the landscapes considerably.
Great. So Mariella, I think I've seen some questions coming in, which is great. We asked for participation and we're getting it. So would you like to pick one of those and fire it off to the group?
Absolutely. So let's see. So in your organization, what kind of support exists for sourcing candidates? How does that support affect recruiters' burnout and their ability to do their jobs effectively? Why don't we start with that one?
Okay, so sourcing support. Who wants to take that one?
Yeah, so we actually identified a dedicated role because again, the recruiters were expected to do it all. And so really trying to play to people's strengths and take some things off folks' plates. So we created a role. We also invested in some technology and systems, the doc cafes, practice match, those types of things. Those didn't exist in a big way before we fully formed as a team. And the team was encouraged to do the research and interview these vendors to understand which system they thought would be best. And we do our ROI on each of them every year to determine what's the best way to have them help, right? So that way, let the systems, let different people with different expertise help lift that load for you.
Great. So the dedicated role plus the technology helps with the sourcing function. What about you, Sandro? How do you support the sourcing function? What are your strategies there?
Love to see that and actually agree. We have a very similar structure. So we have basically a dedicated individual who manages and oversees our sourcing efforts. He's actually categorized as a marketing communications, manager. We like to do that just because for the outside world, sometimes people don't understand what sourcing really means unless you're really in talent acquisition or recruitment. So it's really kind of more broad to the outside real world. And exactly what they're doing over up in Massachusetts up there is we're that individual is leading the sourcing efforts. He does vendor management. So we work with the practice matches of the world, New England Journal of Medicine, Healthy eCareers, et cetera, et cetera. We also look at obviously what the cost is and then what the return on is. We're data driven. And I think that's really worked out effectively for us where recruiters are still owning all their positions and they're working with this sourcing team and all the vendors that we work with. And then we actually have an outside marketing firm that we team up with, again, that it's internally controlled by our marketing lead. That if we're looking for certain initiatives, anesthesia is always tough, neurology's been tough right now. OB, I think, is kind of in a tougher landscape across or a tougher recruit across the landscape right now. Is we'll just pinpoint those hard to fill specialties and work with all the avenues that we've created to say, hey, we need more of these. So it's worked out really effectively. I mean, I've seen it and it works for some people. It doesn't work as well for other people where they have a dedicated sourcer, one sourcer per every 2 or 3 recruiters, for example. We decided to go a different direction and just say, hey, we're having a centralized, marketing and sourcing kind of subdivision within our team. And that's specific to physician and APP recruitment. He works hand in hand with our corporate marketing partners. And then we have a medical group marketing team, and he works very collaboratively with them to make sure branding's aligned, but he's specific to physician recruitment and provider recruitment because it's much different than how the other marketing folks, look at their day-to-day job. So it's worked out really well and couldn't agree more with Nadra, where we're kind of going with that approach where, again, it's kind of a subdivision. We call it a pillar on our team, and he's spearheading all that and works directly with all our recruiters. They're owning it as the recruiter, but he's helping spearhead those sourcing efforts.
Definitely
Yeah.
makes sense to professionalize that group and with the resources and focus to feed the pipeline, so to speak. Mariella, I see more questions coming in.
I do, yes, and that was great, by the way, Nadra and Sandro. It's really interesting to hear those very different but really interesting perspectives. So, Sasha had 2 questions, and the first one I'm going to kind of like revamp a little bit because I think it'll be interesting to ask it, and I'm going to add something to it. Her question was, the reported burnout that you were able to find, does it vary among the different kind of work settings? For example, working in the office versus remote, in-house recruiter, working for a firm. And I would assume the answer, most likely would be yes. But I'm gonna throw something else out there, and for those individuals that are on our members that are on the webinar, there's a lot of our members that are also solo recruiters and who take on this burden on their own. and they have to be a jack of all trades. So I know you all, especially both of you, Nadra and Sandra, you really lead really big teams, but what are your thoughts, all of you, in terms of how solo recruiters do it? Because if we all get burnout, I can only imagine someone whose responsibility is 100% on them and, they're responsible to carry the load for everything. So I'm kind of turning that question around because I think it'll be interesting for those of that are on the webinar who do this all day by themselves.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to hear what folks have to say. I don't know, Nadra and Sandro, if you've been in that type of situation, or if you have friends or colleagues that are the solo recruiters, but it is an interesting point. It rolls everything up under one person, so it becomes even more challenging. So, any words of advice to anyone out there doing that from either one of you?
One thing I'll say is AI is your friend. So we've even started using AI to help us with our position descriptions and other tools, and it's been super helpful. So that's one recommendation. The other is to partner with vendors that can take things off your plate. We have a partnership with HWL that helps us manage system-wide our locums requests. We're working with relocation firms to handle relocation budgets. And so the more that you can, phone a friend, so to speak, and work with a vendor partner to take some things off your plate while not adding, wage and salary expense to your organization, which I'm sure is almost impossible to get. It doesn't matter what the size of your department is, getting those non-revenue generating positions approved are a challenge. And so how do you just kind of think about it and go in a different direction to get the support that you need?
Yeah, that's an important point. I've been to many trade shows and listened to a lot of keynote speakers, and I can't remember who it was or where they were from, but it really stuck with me, which is healthcare systems try to do everything. And when the successful organizations recognize what their core function is, and they attempt to partner with as many specialty providers in different service areas to lighten the load around the edges. And I think that's what you're describing. So I saw a question come over around AI, and you brought it up, Nadra. So Sandro, what
Thanks.
about AI? What all are you doing to help the function using AI or not?
Yeah, so it's a great question. I actually went to a seminar actually just last week. It was in New York City, and it was all about AI in healthcare. To answer your question, so our organization is actually has deployed 66 AI agents across our system within our individual department. We're using one or two. We're using Microsoft Copilot right now, which some of you may have heard of. It's doing the job well, and I think to what was mentioned earlier is using this technology and tools to your advantage. It's not always perfect. You can use something within AI or a certain technology, it spits something out. I think you still need to put your eyes through it. We're not really at a point there where it's replacing people or replacing recruiters or people as full-time employees. But what it's doing is it's making jobs more efficient. So exactly what was said earlier. Hey, if you need help drafting something up, it can help you draft it. You may need to make tweaking, but it's going to save you a significant amount of time up front. I think using some of that technology and tools is very helpful. And then just partnering up and having tools for success. There's a lot of technology. There's a lot of vendors that do that. And listen, I get if you're like a one-man show. We weren't always a huge operation. And there was times where, even when I first started and even at my previous organization, I was doing a lot of kind of jack of all trades, master of none. Is that how they call it? And it is difficult. And I think using tools to your advantage, technology, AI, everything that will continue to evolve will only make your job, again, more efficient. Being organized is very important. And if you're ever justifying, a certain spend for a vendor or even an additional staff person, go talk to your finance person and see how long there's a vacancy on a physician and see how much revenue they're missing out on. And that's a good sell to say, hey, we may need some more bodies here because this is all the revenue we're missing out by not having a provider here. Same thing with cost of locums, which I know we're familiar about. Unfortunately, staffing and temp labor is more expensive than a perm employee. So if you're using a lot of that, again, we also partner with HWL. They make everything very, very efficient. But at the end of the day, it's also more expensive than having a perm employee. Is locums ever going to go away? No, it's not. But if you can start reducing some of that by saying, hey, we can fill a position here. If we have the resources to get what we need, we don't have to depend as much on an outside physician, or we don't have to depend on a vacancy where we're losing out on a lot of revenue, and it'll help. So to kind of be more direct, Jeff, to the question is using tools at your advantage, using technology, using your vendors to an advantage will make your job more efficient and probably more organized. So you'll have more time to do the things that you need to do. Is it ever going to replace? No, I don't see that happening really anytime soon.
Very good.
So there's,
Go
sorry,
ahead.
Jeff, I was just going to say there's a couple of extra questions and maybe we can address and then we can
Sure.
continue. So one of the questions was if we could talk about the soft but increase, and I like the way that Dennis kind of positioned it, the soft but increased competition between us all in-house recruiters. And it's true, especially in tight markets where there's, the competition is fierce and you have several different healthcare systems competing for the same talent. There's competition, between us, and that in and of itself can be overwhelming for some and create a lot of tension and a lot of burnout. So, how do you address that? How is that addressed from that perspective? How do we play nice with each other? How do we continue to be amicable and to help each other out and to work collaboratively? Another one of the questions, and I'm going to kind of tie this in because I think it's also part of it, is, are you allowing your physicians to attend conferences, educational conferences, AAPPR, MAPRA, NEPRA? And I think that that's also an opportunity, especially those regional conferences as well, to be able to build that relationship and that rapport. So how do we address that? How do we deal with that? How do we play nice in the sandbox and help each other out by the same, and at the same token, still go for the best candidate we can in our own backyards?
Frenemies, right?
Yes, that's a great one. Yes.
Well, so I'll disclose that our state is the most densely populated state in the country. And where our health system sits, it's right in between New York City and Philadelphia. One of our hospitals, I think, is 4 or 5 miles away from Manhattan, New York City. So we compete with all those large institutions. I have a great relationship with all those folks, including our competitors in our backyard. I always joke to say, if you could throw, a rock, you'll hit another one of our, competing hospitals. I have a great relationship. I don't think that, listen, we're all in it together. That's like when we go to AAPPR. I'll be there, by the way. Hopefully I can meet some of you guys in person. But we're all in this together, and I think it only helps the landscape as a whole. I think of something that happened in our backyard in anesthesia, where it was us and a couple of bigger health systems where, they were throwing more money at the anesthesiologist, and then they would go and the doctor would go to the other health system and say, hey, I have this offer. Then we would have to increase it, and it was going back and forth. Before you know it, they're making hundreds of thousands of dollars more over the course of 2 or 3 years. So if I had to do this again, I probably would become a CRNA or an anesthesiologist by background, but we're here now, so that's fine. But I think just having good collaboration between between your team and some of the people that you work with. I mean, healthcare is so small that by helping to say, hey, we're doing this new and exciting thing, we're working on this massive project right now, and I'm just using it as an example. I don't want to go down a rabbit hole with credentialing. So once we hire a physician, we're working with the CVO, payer cred, the medical staff office, HR onboarding, et cetera. It's very clunky. I've talked to other health systems that it's not that easy once a physician is signed and they're onboarding. If there's ways that we can share certain knowledge of, hey, this is how we're doing it in our health system, or hey, this doc didn't want to join, this location, but I have one for you. I'll call my counterpart up and down the street and just say, hey, if they want it, feel free to have it. And I work very closely with Hackensack Meridian, which is another competitor. They're a large health system in our neck of the woods, and I have a very good relationship with the person who runs that team. And we kind of swap ideas and even candidates sometimes. And at the end of the day, if there's a decision where a doctor says, hey, I want to go to this location for whatever reason, my parents live in that area, I'm from that area, we're moving there, it's too far, your facility's too far, okay, go. And there's going to be another time where she's going to do the same to us. So I think it's better in this industry to not always fight and to collaborate, because we're much newer than talent acquisition and human resources and recruiting on everything non-clinical or non-billable. Those teams are much more mature. We're kind of behind the curve in that regard. I think physician recruiters need to work together to tackle certain situations of physician shortages, how we overcome some of the locums pieces kind of always tying in and, driving us crazy, calling us, 100 times a day. And if we can work together to say, hey, these ideas are terrific, let's share them. I think as a kind of physician recruitment space, we're going to advance much, much quicker than if we're trying to do it by ourselves. So hopefully that helps.
I would agree. Well, and Nadra, you're, maybe less than 100 miles from what many would say is the Mecca of healthcare in the metropolitan Boston area. And I don't think the competition gets any stiffer than that. So how do you treat your fellow peers in the HR community there in the New England area?
So you are correct. We are 45 miles from Boston. So it's,
Yeah.
And many of our providers live somewhere between Worcester and Boston. So they can go 25 minutes in either direction. We do tell them the traffic is much lighter on our side of things, but that isn't always a powerful motivator, and they're going to beat us for salary and sign on all day long. So what I would say is we function both internally and externally as a team that is has high integrity and respect. If we have a colleague from another institution that calls and wants to pick our brain about what, we heard you just changed this benefit, or we heard you just, did something with salaries. We're not going to hide the fact. We're not going to open up the book and show them everything, but we are going to share information. And I'm not going to lie, when we get a candidate over Boston Hospital, there is a little happy dance that goes on in our office. So anyone who knows me knows I'm a little bit competitive. So, in the end, we don't want someone to say yes and leave us in 10 months because they got a better offer somewhere else. We want them to truly see themselves and their career and a future with what we're about and what our culture is about. And, if Boston is more their cup of tea, that's okay. We'll just keep working.
So you bring that up about, winning a candidate, losing a candidate. I've never been a recruiter in all transparency, but I've been working around the recruitment function for many, many years. And just even from a sales perspective, it's kind of similar. So one of the frustrating things, I'm sure, for a hardworking physician recruiter is to work so hard to source a candidate, to get them in the process, to get through the interviews, to get to the offer, to get it all to the finish line, and then get that, no, I'm sorry, I'm going somewhere else. That's got to be one of the hardest parts of the job, and I would think contributes to the burnout factor at all. So Nadra, how do you handle that personally with recruiters? You've probably been in that seat before earlier in your career, and what do you say to someone who just poured their heart out and came up on the short end?
Yeah, that scenario probably isn't as heartbreaking as a department that drags their feet on a great candidate and we lose them. That one
Interesting.
is more just a sharp object in the chest, right? Because the recruiter has done everything right. And the department just couldn't make a decision. And in some specialties, you've got to move quickly. You've got to show them the love, so to speak. And we have departments that waffle and waver. And I would say that's probably harder than we get to an offer and you just get outbid, right? That
Yeah.
happens. I don't think that's as defeating. I think when the department or your client that you're working with hasn't lived up to their end of the service level agreement and we lose a candidate, that's where people start to feel a little frustrated and defeated.
Yeah, I could imagine that. And that's something that I would think, as a recruiter, you have to ask yourself, is this organization benefiting from my skill set, or are
Right.
they letting it, kind of be squandered a little bit because of that inability to make decisions?
Yeah.
Sandra, what about you? How do you handle both the original question around, losing the candidate after all the hard work, but what Nadra brought up, which is that partnership between the hiring group and getting them to make those decisions in a timely fashion so you don't lose someone who's interested. They always say you got to strike while the iron's hot. Well, that iron may not be hot in a couple days if there's another offer on the table. So how do you deal with that?
Yeah, it's a great point. I listen, we see the people declining, the rate of declining much higher when we drag our feet. So I couldn't agree more with having that, being able to be nimble as far as getting the agreements out. Sometimes it's not as easy as it seems up front. I think that that's a big piece, and that is really a demotivator for the recruiters if they don't have that. I mean, at the end of the day, it's going to happen. It's going to probably happen a lot where you go through this entire process and unfortunately we don't get that person to the finish line. I would probably have to agree that it's much harder if internally we're not doing what we're supposed to. If the recruiter, and I've seen this, time and time again, where the recruiter does everything right, we put our best foot forward, and unfortunately the candidate just goes elsewhere, and it's like, hey, at least we gave it a good shot. At least
Yeah.
they had a great experience. We're very passionate, and some of you probably know me, but I'm very passionate with some of the things that we do, and we like to provide what we always call like a white glove service, where regardless of where that physician's coming from, we have them fly in from all over the country. We want them to say, regardless if they sign with us or not, hey, I had a great experience with these guys, and it was a great interview process, and we appreciate you. And we get a lot of feedback from candidates that unfortunately decide to not join us. I mean, trust me, we don't have 100% conversion rate, not even close. But at least if they can give us some of the feedback of, hey, this is what was great, this is what we're doing, or feedback that we may not want to hear, but it's valuable of, hey, this is some of the concerns or some of the things where I think you guys have opportunities to grow. We love that, because then the second time someone comes around, we can take some of that feedback. And if we keep hearing the same thing over and over again, okay, let's change the process. The physician's getting bored. We're throwing them around too much. They're seeing too many people in a day. They're not getting enough breaks, things like that. We take that feedback. And then I'll just end with a story, because this just happened actually very recently. We had a breast surgeon that came in. She was from New York City, one of our competitors, went through the entire process, worked with our, oncology recruiter for many, many months. We got her to the finish line. She was about to sign the dotted line, calls Henry, who leads our, oncology recruitment. She's like, Henry, I'm sorry. Things changed. Her husband ended up getting a job in Texas, and they were relocating. And she's like, "Listen, we're not even going to move in the area anymore. I'm sorry. We're going to Texas, and I'm looking for a job there because of her husband's arrangements." Long story short, she gives us one of her friends and colleague who's also a breast surgeon. We ended up hiring that person probably in a month after all that happened, because it went so fast. It expedited. We had great references conferences, and it worked out. And we still talk to some of the people that we don't end up hiring. Hey, let's just keep in touch, and if anything changes, give us a shout, or we'll keep in touch. And it's more of the partnership, not just a transaction to that point. So I love hearing that, and we've had that quite a bit, happen to us. So I think those are ways to try to help with some of those situations and avoid people getting discouraged.
Great. Mariella, any other questions from the audience?
So yes, there are two questions, but I also want to be mindful that it's 1:50. I'm not sure if you still have more on your presentation.
No,
Um,
I don't really.
okay,
Nope, we're
perfect. So
just
I'll share both questions. So the first one is, how do you prevent burnout to those individuals that are supporting your recruiters? So not necessarily the recruiter, him herself, but the support that is, providing that, the sourcer, the coordinators, the ones who actually, schedule the logistics. What do you recommend? Any words of wisdom from that point of view?
I'll be quick. I think just diversifying their work days makes a huge difference. I also am a huge supporter of good culture. Um, I've been fortunate enough, our team's grown, and yeah, we've lost a couple people throughout the years. 90% of the people, I think it was only one person ended up moving out of country, but they've actually been promoted or elevated within our organization to a different team. So I love to see the growth. As much as it hurts me to lose good people, it's like, hey, you're staying with the organization, you're growing. I'll keep the answer short, is I think by diversifying how their day is and by giving them ownership and accountability, it goes a very, very long way. Not doing the same things every single day. Some of my sourcers and specialists who support visits, they go on conferences, they join recruiters when they can, they go on site visits when a recruiter can't go. They're doing certain reports and they're involved in special projects where, necessarily it wasn't part of their main job description, but it helps keep things exciting. They like that they can share value. And hey, if you're doing this day to day and you're on an on-site and you're hearing this feedback, give it to me. Talk to Sandro, and then they feel like their opinion is validated, and it goes a very long way when you actually say, "Hey, I'm hearing what you're saying. Let's make some of these changes." And I think that that's how it avoids some of that, is by just kind of making it a little creative and spicing up their job description a little bit there.
Yeah, and
makes a
I would
lot of
echo
sense.
what Sandra said, and just would add, we have some of our coordinators we have as project leads, so that they get to do some fun work and boss the recruiters around a little bit, in terms of submitting information for data, idea boards, so on and so forth. And then part of the reason we created the sourcer position was it's a natural career path to a recruiter, right? So we promoted a coordinator to a sourcer. That sourcer has aspirations to be a provider recruiter, and so the cycle goes. So you don't necessarily have to lose them to other areas within the organization if you provide an internal career ladder. We're also exploring a career ladder with the recruiters themselves and creating a senior level, because there is different levels depending on how long people have been in their roles, and they can perhaps, as part of their responsibilities, mentor others. So it creates some internal growth and mobility within the team, even if it's a small team. And then I think recognition is very important, making sure that we're recognizing and acknowledging one another's contribution, and that it's a team sport and no one role is more important than the other.
Yeah, I think that's,
Very
thank you both so much. And I think that that ladder is something that is absolutely necessary in our industry, so that you have something to work towards. So thank you. So the other question is actually a little bit of a staffing question. I'll share it but I think you kind of answered it already. The question was the sourcing support. Is it tied one-on-one to a physician recruiter? Are the recruiters still sourcing candidates themselves? So, I guess that having the support provides for, I guess a question related to this topic would be that the support does provide some sort of outlet, for the recruiter. But I guess it's more of a staffing question. Is it a one-to-one? How are you structured? And maybe we can address it for like a minute. How is your team structured in terms of a sourcer to a recruiter?
Yeah, so we just have the one sourcer for 7 recruiters, and her role is really to help with those kind of very hard to fill, some positions, we can post and within an hour, we've got 7 or 8 applicants, right? Others, you're looking for the 4 fellows that graduate across the country. So the sourcer supports everyone, and that there is conversation around where are the highest areas of need. If I could add another one, I would. Because they do lighten the load quite a bit. And because they, spend time in that space, their skills improve over time. And they learn some tricks of the trade. So
Thank you.
I don't want to speak for Sandra.
We basically just have 2 internal individuals that are responsible for our sourcing efforts. So it's managed basically by the marketing lead, and then there's a sourcer underneath that who's reporting directly to that individual. So to answer the question is no, we don't have a sourcer or marketing person that's working really under a certain amount of recruiters or a person. We essentially have 2 and we have 13 recruiters. So it's kind of like 6-to-1. From what I've read, I think the ratio, if we could do it, would probably be like 4-to-1 is probably the better answer. But I don't think that there's really a magic answer. It's, hey, let's see what the need is or the demand is. We look at what we source and advertise, and like Nadra's doing, we have partnerships with other vendors. So, hey, we don't need 6 or 7 different vendor partnerships and also an agency that's helping with marketing. That's replacing some of the internal sourcing. So it's really kind of finding a sweet spot if you have resources or a budget to say, okay, do I want to go a direction internally or externally? So that's kind of how it's structured. So we basically have 2 individuals that do sourcing internally, and then we have a team of specialists that they're ratioed at 3-to-1, 3 recruiters per 1 specialist, and that specialist just does a lot of administrative travel arrangements, creating itineraries. I know some other organizations, some of the sourcing people kind of deal with that type of business. So we separate it. Sourcing, there's 2. And then a team of specialists, which they're called experienced specialists, they're ratioed at 1 specialist per 3-to-4 recruiters, and they help with all the other things I just mentioned.
Great. Okay, so I'm going to ask our last question. We only have a few minutes left. So Nadra and Sandro, thank you both. First of all, before we wrap up, for joining today. You're very busy people, and we appreciate it, and look forward to seeing you at AAPPR in Orlando. But you both mentioned just in that last answer about wanting more or looking potentially more resources in your organization. So, I'll go to you, Nadra, first. How do you, I guess it's 2 parts, but we're short on time. What is it you feel like you need to get to the next level, so to speak, or maybe you're satisfied with where you are? And what can the larger organization do to support physician recruitment, generally speaking, and how do you advocate for that?
Yeah, I mean, I have felt very supported. That's one of the advantages, I think, sometimes of being new, is they want to keep the new kid happy. So to kind of ask for the world. And there's always that balance of, do you bring on more permanent FTEs, and then maybe your requisition's slow and you're talking about displacement. So it is a bit of a dance. And again, where you can get outside vendor support, reasonably expensed, there's less risk that you're going to have to think about reductions or different positions, and they're out there. The other one I would offer is a travel company to help coordinate your travel. If you've got a person on the phone or online working with airlines and limo companies and all of those other things. There are companies out there that will take that on for you. It costs nothing for you. They get a cut of that concierge service. We're working with Uber, black cars. They're going to take care of those, cars so there are companies out there that can help you, so that you can really, really hone in on what you need to do the true recruitment function.
All right, Sandra, bring us home. 1 minute. How do you get
Uh,
more support? How do you advocate for that?
yeah, it's a good question. I mean, listen, I think you can always say, we look at big metrics in recruitment. Time to fill is a very important one, and you're always going to want a quicker time to fill. I think where we have a disadvantage, and I almost don't want to use that word, but I will, where our life cycles are very, very long. We could be working with a physician, a new resident, a new fellow, where they're still in their training, and we're hiring them into next year. We're hiring people into 2027. The life cycles are long. So we can be working with a surgeon for months and months at one point. And I think where we always think that there's opportunity, or call it resources, or hey, where there's support, is trying to shorten up some of that process, because there's so many teams involved. It doesn't matter if you're a single, hospital, and if you're running it, you're a jack of all trades at a smaller organization or a large organization. There's still all these different people involved. There's always legal involved. Once that person signs, there's a medical staff office involved, et cetera, et cetera. And with all these players kind of in the pot with, hey, this is when a provider signs, is shortening some of that. So I think if you can find, and I'm still trying to find some of the answers, I think I have some, but always trying to find out a way to shorten that, and resources or ways or avenues or people you could partner up to shorten the time to fill. And then also when the physician or APP is signed, to shorten that onboarding process. That is where, I think we would strike gold.
Great. Well, this has been a great discussion. The feedback in the chat from some of the folks that are in the audience concur. So thank you very much, both of you. Thank you, Mariella, for helping us through this with the
Absolutely.
introductions and the questions. Hope to see you all in Orlando, for those of you both in the audience and on the panel that will be there. We look forward to it. HWL will be there as well in our booth, and also hosting a happy hour. So you're all invited. Reach out to me directly if you haven't gotten that invite. But thank you very much, AAPPR as well. And we look forward to the next time we can do this.
Thank you. And thank you all for joining on behalf of AAPPR. I really appreciate it. So your credit will show up on your transcript. And for those of you attending AAPPR, I also will be speaking on Wednesday. So I hope to see you all there. Please join me. I will be one of the last presenters, but hopefully you'll still be enthused to join us. So please look for my presentation as well. And I look forward to welcoming you as well. So have a great rest of your day, and goodbye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.